All right, y'all. I would say that you know what time it is, but it's been a while. So maybe you don't know what time it is or you've forgotten. But just in case, it is time for my obligatory seltzer crack. I just drink a lot of seltzer. Big bombshell, actually, I do not drink a lot of tea. I know. The the tea in the title is one, it's me, and then two, it is the proverbial tea that I spill when I come on here and talk about a topic or concept or current event or what have you. I started the very first episode that way because I had a fresh seltzer in hand and I thought it would be cute. And I did it. I listened to it back and I was like, I'm going to have to just start every episode like this, aren't I? But I think it's cute. It's fun. It sets up a vibe, whatever that is. Happy New Year, everyone. I know it's a little late for Happy New Year's, but it is the first episode of the year. So the goal after this episode drops, not on YouTube because YouTube's going to be its own thing, but the goal for Spotify and Apple Podcasts after this episode drops is for there to be either weekly episodes or bi-weekly episodes at most. But that should be the most time that we go in between episodes for a while. And you know what? The very first episode I sat down to record, my window was shattered by the landscapers at my apartment complex. And today the plan was to record, and we lost power for about an hour. I live in the mid South, like literally an hour and a half south of Ohio, and I don't know, like 2 hours south. I share a border with Indiana, and they still want to act like they don't get enough snow every year for them to actually have like the infrastructure and the resources to handle it. But you know what? I lost power and I was like, yep, today's the day. We're so back. We are so back. But on a real note, if something bad happens to my apartment every time I sit down to record, I will actually have a mental breakdown and cry. So I am not in any way actually trying to manifest that at all. But yeah, I hope you all had a great holiday season. If not, we got over 300 days till the next round, and in the meantime, I wish you the best of luck. We're talking about goals today. I already went over one of my big goals with y'all, probably one of the only goals I'll share here. That being the goal of dropping an episode bi-weekly, if not weekly, for as long as I possibly can in 2024 until I need a break, which will surely be more than a couple months, surely. And we'll actually use that goal as a later example towards the end of the episode. It is a little bit late to be talking about goals. However, I thought about it and I have no real qualms about it because one, you've probably already made your goals and or resolutions, and you might be able to assess them based on some of the things that we discuss, and you might be able to fine tune some of those goals or resolutions to make them a little bit more effective for you and have a better chance of success towards the end of the year. Two, you might already be losing some steam on some of your goals or resolutions, and this episode might help you realize why. And then finally, something that we've been kind of seeing in gyms or just as online service providers, we of course see that initial surge of resolutioners in early January. But then that group kind of slowly starts tapering off just a little bit, kind of between the 21st and the 31st of January. And then we start seeing almost like a second wave in early February, where I think it's the people that are either just trying to avoid the crowds in January, kind of like someone who is trying to avoid traffic. They might leave super early or super late after the function to just kind of wait it out. Or I have a feeling it's a lot of people who maybe they're just trying to recover from the holidays, get back in a groove, and they just haven't had the chance to really get to the gym like they wanted to. Or they're just having a hard time starting and they're like, oh shit, it's February. Let me get on this. I don't know what it is, but after Valentine's Day, we see another dip. I don't know if it's because people are getting cuffed up, they're getting comfortable, or again, life is once again getting in the way and they're not able to commit as much as they were hoping to or trying to in early January. And then finally, early March, we see that third wave. Again, these are the people who maybe life got in the way, or they're starting to realize that their goals are no longer several months away, but like a couple months away, and they need to get their shit together. And a lot of the advice in this episode, if not all of it, is going to be very timeless. All things being equal anyway. I mean, who knows, in the next 20 years, we could have like AI doing everything for us, and then we all just turn into like, I don't know, pod people in the Matrix, or we become like the passengers on the Wall-E ship from the Wall-E movie, if y'all remember, which I love that movie. I haven't seen it in a while. But all things being equal, I think this advice is very timeless. And so whether you're kind of at the tail end of that first wave, whether you're on the second wave, the third wave, or whether, I don't know, you're halfway through the year and you're kind of looking inward and realizing that you're just having a really hard time, I think you can get a lot of use from this episode. And honestly, probably what I'll do is I'll probably revisit this episode, but like January 1st or 2nd next year, and I'll just have it ready to go. I think that I could only ever add more value or more information to this episode. I don't think there's anything that I would have to like take away because it's dated or it doesn't age well or anything. So not only will I be drawing from my own self-development experience, but also be drawing from my experience helping dozens, possibly even a couple hundred people at this point. It's at least over 100, as well as a good chunk of some of what I learned in school. I have my bachelor's in business with a concentration in management, and a good portion of that is just learning about people. And not only that, but what motivates people. And that doesn't have to be in the context of the workplace. And just as a side note, I've worked a lot of places in my life, and I can always tell who went to school for business and who didn't amongst like any leadership or management. I believe that part of it is because they don't go over those aspects of like just how do you set up your people and how do you support them properly to make sure that you're all working together as like one functioning unit. A lot of the concepts and a lot of the questions posed in this episode are really simple when you put them on paper, but hopefully they're presented in a way that really makes you think, especially think internally and deeply, and draw out of you what exactly you want and what that looks like, and then what the path is to get there. Each section of the episode will be important in its own way, but I can kind of break it down into 3 large general sections. And the first one being the biggest problems I see with most goals that people come to me with. And I don't mean for that to sound like I have the secret sauce, I have the keys to making the best goals, but it's not like we're born with an innate knowledge of how to create goals effectively. And we're not really taught it in school either. We're really kind of given the goal. And maybe down the line, some autonomy is introduced and they say, well, what do you want to be? 17-year-old, 16-year-old person who is not yet a fully formed individual. What would you like to be when you grow up? And you say, I want to be a doctor. Maybe not a doctor. And you make that decision before you're really allowed to do anything else, honestly. You can, in the United States anyway, you can drive and you can get a tattoo and you can vote. And that's about it. And you are going to decide your career path for the rest of your life. But anyway, you say that, your teachers, guidance counselor, whatever, say, okay, have fun with that. And then you go off to school and maybe your college advisor helps you. But depending on maybe if you're online or if you go to community college, you're still not really being given a lot of help. So we're not really told how to make goals. We are kind of given the goal for a long time. And then once we can finally start developing our own goals, we're not told or shown how to create that path. Again, like a lot of the time that path is handed to you. So I say all that to say, I don't want it to come across like I'm trying to sound like a guru who has all the answers, but I'm saying a lot of people are shit at making goals for themselves, and why wouldn't they? But in order for you to address a problem, you have to be aware of the problem. Next section is the why it's important to make fully formed and well thought out goals. This is because we cannot have proper action without proper understanding. So sitting down, having a dialogue with yourself, and really trying to figure out what is important to you and why is very crucial to creating effective goals for you that you can actually achieve. And then the third section is just the how. How are we going to get from where we are to where we want to be? And how can we set ourselves up for success? So section 1 kind of answers what, section 2 answers why, section 3 answers how. The who is you, and then the when, we'll kind of discuss the when just throughout the episode. So in my notes, first question I have is, do you have goals or do you have aspirations? An aspiration is defined as a hope or ambition of achieving something. The goal is defined as the object of a person's ambition or effort, an aim or desired result. And there are some similarities there. There is a little bit of overlap between the definitions. You can't have the object of ambition without ambition. The thing with aspirations is they are normally big picture, and they don't really have a defined starting point or ending point. All we know is that they are somewhere out there, out there in the future somewhere, out there in the ether of what you want or what you think you want. It's kind of like, and I'm going to lose some people here, but it's kind of like when you're playing Sims 4 and you literally have aspirations, or I mean, your sim has aspirations. For example, my most recent game, my sim had the chef or the culinary aspiration. And within that aspiration, there were many ways and goals and things that the sim could do to fulfill that aspiration. And within that aspiration, there were many things, goals, and many different avenues that the sim could take to fulfill that aspiration. So for example, you could max out the, I think, again, culinary or cooking aspiration by either becoming a mixologist or a chef. And the thing about it is you can't max out the aspiration without completing all of the little goals and activities along the way. The problem with life is life doesn't just hand you all the little things and goals and milestones that you can do in order to, one, feel fulfilled, but two, like you are working towards that aspiration. So I would highly urge you to reconsider the grandiose goals, because those aren't goals, those are aspirations. I want to be a national champion in powerlifting. I want to look the way I did in my 20s. I want to be an astronaut. Because what does that mean? And more importantly, how do we get there? So in 2023, my goal was to make a podcast. And I did that. But now we're struggling to make it consistent. So now what? Now we have to have a clear and concise goal. Okay, I want to post bi-weekly, if not weekly. Okay, last episode took you 8+ hours to make. So how are we going to do that? Well, now I've found something to make the process, what would that be, 4 times easier? And now it's just a matter of me finding the time, sitting down, and talking for over an hour. Okay, great. Now we're cooking. Not a callback to the culinary aspiration from earlier. We're simply cooking in the metaphorical sense, I think. Yeah. So where make a podcast was super broad and I wasn't really considering what all went into it, now I have a lot better idea and I can create a more specific goal that also considers my starting point, right? Also in my notes, I have goal versus aspiration. I have need versus want. And then additionally, I have that most goals that I hear that are really kind of more aspirational are too superficial. Best example is I want to look like how I did in my 20s. Also because this is a fitness podcast, right? So I want to look like how I did in my 20s. Okay, you are 45 now. You have 2 kids. You have a full-time job. So how are we going to look like how we did in our 20s? You are effectively an entirely different human. Every cell in your body has turned over and turned over again. You are on a cellular level a different person. And not only structurally, but also mentally, emotionally. So how, but also why? Why do we need to look like how we did? Is it because that's the hottest you've literally ever been? Yeah, that's the cool part about being young. Or even more so, it's because people look back and those are maybe some of the happiest years of their lives. And oftentimes it's with rose-colored glasses. Like, oh, I was partying all the time and I was hooking up and life was cool. And it's like, yeah, you had your first taste of freedom after living under someone else's control for 18 years. And yeah, maybe you were going out and partying on the weekends, but you were also probably getting like 4 hours of sleep during the week. You might have been a lower weight because you were stressed out of your mind not eating, or maybe you were on a meal plan in addition to that wasn't super conducive to getting enough meals in, or maybe your schedule just didn't allow for you to get a lot of meals in. Maybe you played a sport that you just don't play anymore. And I hear it a lot. I hear it from clients and I hear it from friends. I'll hear the, oh my gosh, I was so hot or I was so skinny, but then it's like, okay, but you were also miserable. Like, actually, from conversations we've had, not from like what you choose to remember. Or even just people who have hit when they consider their lowest weight. I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, I hit this weight and I looked really good, but I hated it. And it's like, yeah, dude, you shouldn't have to spend like any minute on this earth in a body that you're miserable in, whether that is on either end of the spectrum, whether that is severely overweight or underweight. And I'm pretty sure that some of the aspirations I mentioned, if not all of them, are very outward facing. They focus a lot on outside appearances. Some other quick examples being what kind of car I drive, what kind of house I live in what kind of neighborhood. And these are all examples of extrinsic goals. Now again, extrinsic, very motivated by external factors. On the flip side, we have intrinsic goals, internally motivated. And it's okay to have extrinsic goals. I know I've made them sound like they're super bad, but in school, we learned that it's healthy to have a good balance of both. In school, we talked a lot about intrinsic needs versus extrinsic need. What is an example of an extrinsic need in the workplace? That could be flexible schedules, work-life balance, healthy work environment. This can even be how much am I getting paid, which is super important. Do I feel like I'm being fairly compensated for the work I'm putting in? And this is why a lot of people, and not to get on a tangent, but this is why a lot of people leave their jobs, because either they're not getting paid enough to live, or they are getting paid enough to live, but their work is way outweighing what they're getting paid or compensated. You know, that can also come through by way of benefits, health insurance, dental, whatever. And then some examples of intrinsic needs in the workplace could be, do I feel valued at my job? Do I feel fulfilled? Am I being acknowledged by leadership or by my coworkers, etc.? And some people are cool with not really feeling fulfilled as long as they're acknowledged, and vice versa. Some people are cool with never getting acknowledged for their work as long as they feel fulfilled doing it. Either way, it helps to tie a genuine need or emotion to a goal. And that need doesn't have to be an essential need. It doesn't even have to be that deep. Some things that might seem superficial, like I want this kind of house in this kind of neighborhood, could be because I need my kid to go to a good school, or I want or need my dog to have a yard to run around in, or I need my family to grow up in a house that they're comfortable in, that has plenty of space for everyone and has room for activities. And if you look deeper, you're also tying an emotion to it as well. I love my kids. I want them to have a good education. I want to live in this kind of neighborhood or this area. Okay, that's the goal. How are we going to get there? We are going to need to get this promotion at work. Okay, that's another goal. And in defining your goals and why you want them and how to get there, you are able to create a clear path to living the life you want to live. But again, we need understanding in order to create action. So try to tie some kind of need or emotion to your goals outside of just, I want this thing. I also found a really good article going deeper into intrinsic goals. A lot of it echoes what we talk about here, and then some of it goes further into detail. I'm going to link that below for anyone who's interested. So another great example of why it's important to have both intrinsic and extrinsic goals, and then we'll move on, is because sometimes that extrinsic goal can actually fight with your intrinsic goal or need. So, okay, you look good externally, or, you look good by society standards, but how do you feel internally? Do you feel like garbage? Do you feel low energy? Do you feel like you crave all kind of food all the time and it's all you can think about and you can't focus on anything else and you're having a hard time achieving other goals, but at least you look good or you think you look good? And again, that kind of aspiration just does not consider the starting point. A big thing with a lot of people, especially women, is they have a hard time with goals like that because, like I said earlier, you are physically and mentally a completely different person. And a lot of that can be attributed to just a loss of muscle mass over the years. You might go through like waves of different workouts or lifestyles that are conducive to gaining muscle, but you'll also go through waves where it's hard to gain or keep muscle, like having a sedentary job or lifestyle. And the biggest opponent of weight loss for women who are kind of older or premenopausal, during menopausal and after, is just being severely under-muscled. So again, a problem with aspirations or lofty goals is they just don't consider the starting point, and oftentimes they don't consider the mechanisms of how to get to the ending point. And this is actually a great introduction into the final section of what some of those mechanisms are and how we can effectively sit down and create an action plan for reaching your goals and achieving them. So some of y'all may have learned about this in school. Maybe you learned about it during a training for work or a seminar, or maybe you've come across it in any kind of self-development content or on social media. And then a lot of y'all have probably never heard of this before, and it is the idea of not just making goals, but making SMART goals. SMART, of course, being an acronym, and that acronym stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. A couple of these parts we're going to go over more in depth than others, just because we already kind of went over some of these concepts earlier in the episode. But I'll still kind of go over it and say how we went over it earlier in the episode, just in case you're not really able to apply it or see the connection in where we discussed it earlier in the episode. And that'll just more help you understand the concept and be able to apply it to your own goals. Making specific goals, obviously, we went over this earlier in the episode when I talked about how there's a difference between goals and aspirations, and how typically aspirations are not specific enough, or they're not really relevant, which we'll also go over here in a little bit. And again, the problems with the goal not being specific is, one, you lose your why, because, if your goal is just to lose weight, well, why? Which we discussed in depth previously. And so it's hard to become attached to a goal that's not specific. It's also harder to create an actual plan. And it's okay to start vague. In fact, starting vague can really help if you want to slowly whittle it down as you go. Think about your why and what your criteria is. It's kind of like when you're watching one of those like CIA, FBI shows and they see like a fuzzy picture and then they're like, zoom in, enhance, zoom in, enhance. And literally it's the same thing. It's like, okay, lose weight. All right. Well, I am in my mid 40s. I don't have a lot of muscle. Okay, we need to start with gaining muscle. Okay, I have no control over my diet. Okay, maybe we start tracking, whether that be a food journal, macros, calories, whatever. For example, my goal of podcasting more in 2024, what does that even mean? Because I didn't post any episodes, I think, after October, so in November or December, and I haven't posted any new episodes yet this year. So if I just post one new episode this year, or if I post maybe 4 episodes total this year, yeah, it'll be technically posting more, but obviously that is not the goal. Obviously, I want to podcast a little bit more than that. So, okay, if we zoom in and enhance, do I want to post double the amount this year? Well, double is only 4. So, or I'm sorry, double is only 8. Double of 4 is 8. So if I quadruple it, okay, 16, that's getting a little bit closer. But if we double that again, 32, something like that, I think between 30 and 40 episodes, I think that could be very attainable. And it's also specific. It's okay, so it's not 52, it's not going to be every week of the year. What does that account for? That accounts for the time in 2024 that I haven't posted for. That also accounts for maybe I need to take some breaks in between. Okay, so when are those breaks going to be? And that'll also keep me from getting discouraged when I don't post because, hey, the plan was 30. So if I have to take a break, as long as it's a planned break, totally fine. And I'm using this as an example for a lot of these just because I don't want the focus or I don't want the most examples for this episode to be around weight loss, right? Because there are so many other goals you can have for yourself and for your life outside of just what you look like or how much you weigh or how much space you take. But I also think it's really applicable to what we're talking about, and you can also use it to apply it to any kind of goal you have in life or in this year, and especially work-related goals as well. So next we have measurable. So I kind of went over it a little bit in the last example of being specific, not just saying I want to podcast more, but I want to podcast once a week, except for these weeks that I pick out at different points in the calendar year 2024. This is measurable because did I record this week? No. Well, oopsie, that's a problem. And I can chunk it up. It can be, okay, by the midpoint of the year, I want to have posted this many episodes. So when I get to that midpoint, if I'm under, I can say like, okay, we're going to have to really push the second half of the year to kind of hit this goal, or I can chunk it up even more into like quarterly goals or monthly goals. And that can kind of keep me on target and keep me on track. To extend this to powerlifting or weight loss, this could be, I want to put 50 pounds on my total this year, or I want to put 20 pounds on my bench this year, or I want to lose X amount of inches off my waist this year. And we'll get into why, but something like a competition's really good too. Like I want to compete once this year, or I want to improve my mile time, or I want to run a half marathon, anything like that. Because you can look at your training logs or look at the data and say, okay, did I add, or halfway through you could say, have I added 10 pounds to my bench because I want to add 20 pounds? If I don't have 10 pounds added to my bench by the end of June, okay, what's up with that? And you can look back at your run logs and say, okay, my mile time is about the same. So what do I need to do to pick that up? Is this a goal I even still care about having? The next one you'll usually see will kind of interchange between attainable and achievable, but I like attainable for the A in SMART. This one, to me, I think takes the most inward reflection, but also the most external, like research or feedback. I think this one can be a little bit ambiguous, which also starts with A, funny enough. And this one we talked a little bit about earlier in the episode. But one question you can ask yourself is, do I have recent data that shows that this is possible? For example, with my goal of wanting to podcast more, if I look back at last year, I can look back and say, yeah, I recorded like 3 episodes within the span of like 2 weeks last year. I can totally manage to record like 1 episode every week. I just need to actually make the time for it and put it somewhere concrete in my schedule where it can live consistently. So earlier in the episode, we talked about the I want to weigh what I did in college example. Okay, do you have any data that you can? Well, no, I've graduated college 20 years ago. I haven't been that way in 20 years. Okay, so maybe that's not the best goal to start with. And then again, I have a lot of people who they look back at a certain weight that they were, and so, okay, maybe they do have data that they can reach that weight because they hit it before, but then they remember, oh, but I was miserable. So maybe you can either make the goal different, or you can keep that goal because you do have recent data to show that you can hit it, but maybe now your goal this time around is make it more sustainable. Unless it's going to feel like trash no matter what. You know, like, I want to be stage lean. Okay, you are not going to feel good stage lean no matter what. It's also not sustainable, also not super possible for a long period of time without serious health effects. But you get what I'm saying. That's kind of the extreme. But basically just, even if a goal is attainable, it might not be sustainable. And that's a conversation to have with yourself as well. Now, the next one, you might see it flopped online between realistic and relevant. I don't really love realistic for the R in SMART just because I feel like it's another R word. It's kind of redundant because we talk about achievable and attainable. Now, if you read these articles, they might be able to create some kind of description that differentiates it from attainable, but from just the big takeaways and just from the ease of remembering the acronym, I don't think it's super helpful the way relevant is. So for the R in SMART today, we will be referring to the word relevant. And when we think of relevant, we might also think of context, and that context can be within a lot of different contexts. It doesn't just have to be within the context of your goal. It can also be just within the context of who you are as a person, your ambitions. We can draw from those vague ambitions to create goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, and relevant. So for example, what is my mantra in life? It is that strength is for everyone. And that really encapsulates all of my beliefs, creating a welcoming space for everyone, creating a safe space for those who feel left out or overlooked or marginalized or oppressed. And we can take that and we can tie it back to one commonality, and that is getting stronger, whether that is for bodybuilding, powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, strongman, or just for the fun of it. So getting stronger or just getting better is something that we can all share. And then from there, we want to make it inclusive. We want to create a safe space, and we want to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. So under that umbrella, what is another goal I have is just making content that reaches people, that educates, that entertains, that helps people. In that vein, yes, podcasting more is relevant because it's my preferred type of content to make, but we can also take episodes and put them in bite-sized chunks that are still either entertaining or informative. They'll reach more people can view the podcast, so on and so forth. It's a cycle, it's the snake eating itself. Whatever that is called, there is an actual Ouroboros. It's an Ouroboros of content that is meant to help people, and that is a big ambition that I can whittle down into tiny chunks, more specific goals like podcasting more frequently, ideally weekly for most of the year. Some other examples, get big house, drive nice car. My friend, there is a lot in between your minimum wage job and getting the big house or driving the nice car. And there is nothing wrong with that, and people need to work those jobs, but perhaps we create some smaller, more attainable goals in between working for minimum wage, not even full-time, not even 40 hours a week, and getting the big house. Maybe we aim for the next promotion up, and then maybe the next promotion up from that, and then probably the next promotion up from that, and then we get the big house or we drive the nice car. And there's other things in there too, like budgeting is a big thing once you do get to those positions. And real quick before we move on, another area where I see people kind of mess this up is cross-training. And you can work on those things like running in your off season. But if you're somebody, say, maybe high level in the WRPF or the USAPL or IPF, there's a lot of obligations and a lot of meets for you to compete in during the year in order to retain some kind of pro status or in order to get invitations to future meets. Something like running a 5-minute mile, like, yeah, it's possible, but there is going to be a lot of planning involved, and you do need to be very calculating. I had to like fish for the word. It wasn't like, I mean, decisive. Yeah. That's like, that could work, but you have to be very like calculated in your steps to do that. You have to really segment out your year. And that's something that not a lot of people are going to do on their own. So that's a big one too, is just cross-training goals that they're not complementary. And it's possible, but again, a lot of thought needs to go into getting those things done. And then timely. This one is so important. And especially in a world that is constantly evolving, where time seems to be flying by so quickly, and everyone has a million things going on at any given time. And especially where more and more people are either getting diagnosed or self-diagnosing with ADHD, creating timely goals is so important. And honestly, we could give ADHD folks their own episode, but people with things like ADHD are going to need even more frequent, timely goals. You can't just rely on, oh, I want to do this by June, because June is 6 months away. You need a little bit more of a deadline in order to get things done. So for people with something like ADHD, maybe even anxiety or other kind of disorders, you may need to tailor your goals even more. But for now, we're just speaking very broadly. Now, the best kind of time constraints are the ones that you do not make for yourself. These are the birthdays. These are the weddings, whether they're your weddings or someone else's wedding. This is the powerlifting meets, the competitions, the marathons, the triathlons, the beach trip to Maui or Myrtle Beach, and everywhere in between. Because when you create your own time constraints, those are super easy for you to keep kind of pushing them back and moving the goalpost. Now, obviously, not everyone has aspirations to compete or run in a marathon. Not everyone has a wedding to go to every year. Everyone does have a birthday. The only thing with that is it's your birthday, so you still have a lot of autonomy with whether or not you get your goal done by that time. So if you don't have these to rely on, that's totally okay. You can still create your own deadlines for things that you feel comfortable sticking to. But if you can anchor any of your goals to a specific date that is with or within your choosing, to like maybe a solid or concrete event or occurrence on your calendar, then that is even better. And again, we can zoom in and enhance. So for example, my goal of posting a podcast every week. Okay, what day am I going to post? Okay, what's the latest day each week that I can record in order to get it edited in time to go out on the day that I want to post? And okay, I can look at my schedule and what days make the most sense for me to record. First half of this episode, I recorded Wednesday. Today's Wednesday, I'm recording this final segment. Wednesdays probably makes the most sense because one of my 1 days off a week and Robbie's gone for most of the day, so it's perfect. Yes, I've been with my boyfriend going on 7 years this year, and I still don't feel comfortable recording this podcast while he's here, especially if I have the choice, right? And again, if you have a loftier goal, buy big house, or maybe even be able to afford big house by the end of the year, then what are the things you're going to have to do between now and then? Are you going to have to get a promotion? Are you just going to have to get better with your spending and better budgeting? It doesn't have to be a big promotion or changing careers altogether or moving companies, getting hired by your dream place, whatever. It might just be, hey, I just need to get my spending together. And that's a really easy one to do. Thanks to today's sponsor, Rocket Money. No, just kidding. Not yet, anyway. I don't know if ever, dude. Rocket Money had that lawsuit, I think, late last year because they were like stealing and selling information. But anyway, giving your goals a deadline, and then the farther away the deadline is, I think the more you're going to want to chunk it up into like little micro goals. And same deal, you want those micro goals to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, because you don't want to get lazy and say, okay, my big goal is smart or whatever. So that means my smaller fractional goals don't have to be. No, they probably still should, because you just want to give yourself the best chance to stick to them. If it's a matter of taking an extra 5 minutes sitting down and planning, like, why wouldn't you do that? You know what I mean? So in summary, y'all, we defined goals. We talked about aspirations and the differences between aspirations and goals. We talked about the problems a lot of people run into. We talk about common mistakes that people make when they set out to make their own goals. We talked about intrinsic versus extrinsic needs, wants, and goals. And here we went into the importance of a why. I feel like we used to see it all the time, like, what's your why? The power of your why. And it really is important, unfortunately, as cliche as it is. And then we define SMART goals and how to use these concepts in order for you to create the most detailed and the most efficient goals as possible and give yourself the best chance for success in reaching these goals. If y'all have any questions about anything discussed, please feel free to reach out to me via Instagram. That'll be linked below. And now that we're on YouTube, feel free to drop a comment if you would like to discuss things further over DMs, but you can't find my Instagram or whatever reason. Let me know and we can get connected, or we can hash it out in the comments. Any engagement helps. And speaking of which, if there's anything you feel like I didn't go over that I should have, or anything that has helped you with your goals in the past, whether that was creating them or achieving them, please leave them below. Please leave any tips or wisdoms that you might have. Or again, if you don't feel comfortable sharing, just message me and then I can leave them in a comment below. I'll make a nice little pinned thread. If you found any of this helpful at all, please leave a like on YouTube and or please leave a rating on Spotify, or share it with someone who you think might find this episode helpful. And with all of that, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and that's it. Goodbye.